I am your host, Nicole Will, and we thank you for joining us as we navigate the world with your aging loved one. We are here to come alongside elders, family members, and the senior living community as we explore the world of aging and elder care with helpful resources, informative interviews, and approachable conversations. We get to do this together, so join us on our journey, and this is the willGather podcast. Today, I have the privilege of welcoming Jennifer Greene. She has always been in the business of helping people. She began her career in anti-trafficking and sexual violence work and transitioned to real estate in 2017. She is the CEO of Property Haus Partners. And while it may seem like a big leap to go from anti-trafficking in the world of sexual violence to real estate, she has always kept her focus on helping people first. Her creative approaches have awarded her several awards, including Rookie of the Year in Real Estate Investing and a nod from J.T. Fox, the world's #1 wealth and business coach, for being one of the most forward-thinking women in real estate investment space. She has elevated her business by meeting new clients with empathy, compassion, and competence while providing holistic solutions that go unmatched by the competition. Jen has also been able to empower many people, especially women, to take on leadership roles and leap into business ownership, and is really passionate about creating a life that exceeds expectations by living and breathing her motto, whatever it takes, on a daily basis. And this is what led me to want to talk with Jen today. We constantly hear from family caregivers and older adults that the whole world of real estate, as you are aging and as you are managing your loved one's home, what can really be as an overwhelming situation doesn't have to be with the help and insight of real estate professionals, and being proactive and thinking maybe a little bit outside of the box of what to consider. So with that, Jen, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, it's a privilege. Thank you for having me.
Yes, I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about your background and what is leading you to really want to touch on speaking to older adults and family members of how they can set themselves up for success. What part of your story led you to really having a heart for this population?
Well, as you heard when I started out, that I worked in a lot of anti-human trafficking and anti-sexual violence work. And it does sound like a big leap, to go from that side into real estate. And, in some instances it is. But again, the motivating factor for me behind everything has always been about helping populations. And it's been one of those things that jumping into real estate, we deal so much with folks who have passed away, and then their family members have inherited homes, and it's super overwhelming and they don't really know what to do. And likewise, if there's still mortgages existing on those properties, a lot of the times it turns into an inherited property that becomes a foreclosure. And those are the two big pieces that we really focus on, is either inherited homes or a probate situation, and then also foreclosures. And seeing these populations and understanding some of the grief and hardships that people are going through while they lose that aging loved one, it just throws another multiple on top of it of making things hard. And so what we've really focused on at Property Haus is setting up people for success, trying to create these holistic solutions that make them feel cared for, that we empathize with them, and that we create a plan and a solution that works for them, and likewise also works for us.
There's so much grief and change and loss, and it's very overwhelming, and it's so helpful to have people that know how to navigate the system. I think real estate can be a very overwhelming world for people that aren't familiar with it. What if you could, let's say, walk people through what those helpful steps or what that process would be for themselves or for their loved one, of what to consider as they're moving into that phase of life where they're needing to consider what their real estate needs are and what their concerns are?
I think one of the biggest, pieces of this is determining whether or not it's appropriate and safe for their loved one to stay in their home. And I know everybody wants to stay in their home. That's always obviously the ultimate goal, but I think sometimes it doesn't necessarily make sense for people, especially if they need more aid and perhaps maybe you're not able to afford, in-house care. And that's the piece, is that if they have to leave the home, what are we going to do with this home? Because the longer a house sits vacant, the more things end up going wrong. And especially being in Minnesota with our harsh winters, rain and water. I mean, I don't think there's anybody in Minnesota that's never had water in their basement. Those are things to think about. And so having some type of plan set up, even before people transition into assisted living places, if that's where they decide to go. And likewise, even if they decide to stay in their home, there's a lot of upkeep with a home. And so deferred maintenance becomes an issue, even if they do stay there. Yes, you may be taking care of the person living there, but maybe the house isn't necessarily being taken care of in terms of that it used to be. And so a lot of the times when I go to places, the house, you hear always when people say it has good bones. Yeah, it has great bones and it was cared for. But a lot of the other things of, deferred maintenance, maybe cleaning out gutters and checking on the basement and doing those certain things when you're not necessarily as mobile as you used to be, can start to become more of a problem. And then, later down the road, when you're looking to sell that property, I mean, all these things come up, and then it's kind of hard to sell sometimes on the traditional market. And that's kind of where we come in, and we're able to help and solve that problem, by being able to sell and buy it quickly if need be. And like I said, creating a plan that works with a family to have them sell the home.
I think that's really good advice, what you just mentioned. And when you say holistic solutions, what does that mean to our listeners and for the services that you provide?
A lot of the times when people think of, real estate investors, they just think, oh, they're going to come and give me this cash number and they're going to lowball me and then, they're going to leave. And yes, there are definitely some people that do that, unfortunately, but that's why we've set ourselves apart from the people that do that, because I think there's a lot more that we have to take into consideration, especially when we're looking at these situations of, aging loved ones, because, especially now, even with COVID, and I've seen this, and it's not a judgment here in any way, but I've seen a lot more cases where I'm going into homes and, there's a lot of stuff in there. And sometimes it becomes a hoarding situation. And I think for some children to be able to take that on with their parents, that's super overwhelming. And so we have a clean out crew that we refer to a lot of people who are very compassionate and empathetic. And, if people are not comfortable going through the things themselves and they don't want to take that on, we have a great crew that we've vetted and we know well and do a good job and go through the home and, take things out for separating, take things out for donating. Some things are trash. And then if they come across something that seems like a family heirloom, those things are always set aside. And we've come across a few things, and we've always returned them because we're ethical and moral people. And those are only those are the people that we work with. And so having those recommendations is really, really important. I think that's one of the biggest things, is sometimes, like I said, that overwhelming a piece of what do we do with the things in the house? And I can't tell you how many times I've said to folks, take the things that are meaningful to you and then leave the rest of it and we'll take care of it. And it's like this huge weight is lifted off their shoulders because nobody really knows what to do with that stuff. Or if they want to sell it. I mean, we have really good estate companies, selling companies that that we work with and that we recommend. And so those types of, or even construction companies, if they want to fix it themselves, or, cleaning companies and those types of things, I think where, yeah, sure, you can go Google something, right? But do you really know if they're going to be the best bet? And we're able to provide those really good referrals because we've vetted everybody. And, I stand by who we recommend and who we refer to. And likewise, the attorneys that I work with over 100 attorneys, if not more, here in the Twin Cities that will send us folks that are looking to sell, their clients' homes. And I mean, they've recommended me. And so the referral partnership, it goes back and forth. And we make sure that we do a good job because it reflects upon everybody that we work with. And so when we say holistic, we really mean it. And that, if I don't know something, I mean, I will for darn sure find somebody who does and make sure that it's a good connection, that they're going to be well taken care of.
You really do. And I can attest to that, your various relationships with attorneys in our community. And not only that, but we are based in Minnesota, but you have a wealth of information and partnerships that span the United States. And so if you want to just let people know that you can also, if they're not in Minnesota, connect them to someone that can help them in whatever state that they are, even if it's not that they need help with selling their real estate or information about that, but just partnering with them on giving them more information wherever they're located.
Yeah, we have a network of, other investors that we work with throughout the country that, again, have been vetted, and I know that they would take care of them the same way that we do. Because sometimes too, when people inherit homes, whether they're in Minnesota or outside of Minnesota, we've helped folks many a times that have, a ski place in Aspen, or a getaway place in Texas, or a cabin in northern Minnesota or Wisconsin. And those things sometimes come into plan, when the estate's being dealt with. And so a lot of the times people don't necessarily really know what to do with those things, especially if they're not from that area. And so I've contacted many of the folks that we have in our referral network, and I've called and I said, hey, we have this case and this house is located at, 123 Main Street. Are you able to go take a look? Let me know if this is something that works for you, and then see how we can help out, the person that's living here, or not living here. Just like I said, looking to sell that real estate or connect with somebody in that area. Obviously we can never 100% guarantee that, but we will always do our best to be able to see if we can find something. And if not, we'll keep digging, hopefully, until we find something.
Yes, and I know, so we're not attorneys, right? We're not offering legal advice, but there's a piece of the puzzle, which is probate and estate planning. And so while we will not speak to that because we want people to speak to their own attorney, give a brief overview of a little bit of the process in terms of, let's say, for a lot of caregivers I interact with, it is very overwhelming when all of a sudden they've inherited property, or they've inherited real estate, or they are responsible for managing it. So whether their loved one is still living or unfortunately they've passed on. What are some things to consider navigating that world? I know you have insight into what is going to set up for that successful transition, whether it's into an assisted living or after the person has passed on, so that those resources can be used adequately.
If possible, I think it's always important to have an understanding in families of what is happening, with assets that are in there. Now, some people are going to share that and some people don't. It's a generational thing that I've seen where, some people have said to me, I had no idea it was happening with anything until, my mom or dad passed away. And others who say, we have everything set. I know exactly where everything is. I know exactly what to do. And again, that's a wide spectrum, and that's up to the family to decide those things. But I think one of the biggest things that ends up always kind of being the last piece of the puzzle is the real estate. And sometimes that can be really hard to deal with, especially if you inherit a home and you don't live there, right? I've helped people so many times where they're the personal representative in the probate case, and they're like, I've never been to Minnesota and I don't really know what to do with any of it. Can you just please help me? I literally had somebody mail me keys because I was speaking to him over Facebook Messenger. He mailed me the keys from Florida to the house.
Wow.
And said, take care of it for me. And we did, and that those are the situations where it's like, I don't even know what to do with this house. And he said, I don't even know. I left the air conditioner on. Can you go check on it for me? I'm like, well, it's winter. I said, I have to go over and turn the heat on. We're going to freeze the pipes. He's like, what do you mean? Pipes freeze? And I said, yeah. You know what I mean? These are the things that it's hard to think about. But the reality is that the longer something, like I said, sits vacant, or, the mortgage is piling up and the payments aren't made and foreclosures are issued. I mean, these are the things that we help folks navigate. And that's why we chose to specialize in these two areas, especially, with probate and foreclosure, because a lot of the times they overlap. So I think too, having, whether it's, you set up an estate plan, probate, more or less, the best way that an attorney friend of mine explained it to me was that probate fills in the holes where there aren't answers.
Hmm.
And so if there's something in your estate plan that doesn't have an answer, that has to go through probate, right? If there wasn't a transfer upon death deed issued, during the time in your estate plan, we don't know what to do with the house, so we have to probate it. And that can cost time and money, and that's something that sometimes people don't necessarily have. And even with how things are going in the courthouses right now, things are very slow. And bills pile up and time piles up and grief piles up and stress piles up. And by the time I get there, sometimes, unfortunately, folks are just big stress balls and they don't necessarily know what to do. And that's when we come in and, like I said, create that plan so that they have a way out, so this house doesn't weigh down on them.
And one thing I loved when we had talked earlier about this was that you have such a big heart for just helping people. And one of the things you mentioned is even if it's not something you can necessarily personally help with or step in or take on that real estate, you're still willing to be a resource to provide some answers and some reassurance. And could you tell us a little bit about, that personal story connects us so much of situations that you've had where you've really walked through that with people?
A lot of the times, just because of all of the attorneys that I have connections with, we call each other all the time. I'm like, hey, I have this really weird situation. I'd love for you to help me out with it. Can you help me, with X, Y, and Z? And likewise, they'll call me back like, I have a really weird real estate question for you. Like, do you think you could help me out with this? And so does it always result in a sale? No, but that's not the point. It's about building a network of relationships. And that's something I've really nurtured over, 2020 with COVID, was making sure I'm networking and keeping these connections alive. Because the thing is that, we don't know what's going to happen with the housing market. Nobody really knows, but unfortunately what we're seeing is, once these forbearances are gone and, foreclosures, I feel like are going to happen again, and they will happen. It's just a matter of how many and at how at all at once, or what ends up happening. And so I think setting ourselves up for having these networks and referrals, regardless of the situation, is going to set people up for success, because being proactive about it now will only help us later. And so having any type of referral or networking or any of those things right now for people who don't know what to do in this situation, especially if they have a loved one or if there's a reverse mortgage set in place. Those can be really confusing and people don't necessarily understand how those work. And so having somebody that you can go to just bounce ideas off of. I have people calling me all the time saying like, I don't have a house for sale. I just had somebody the other day, like, I don't have a house for sale and I don't need the help, but my friend has 2 houses that he needs to sell and his house is going through foreclosure and I can't help him. Can you help him? Right? So that was a situation where that person didn't necessarily need help, but it was somebody else who did. And so talking to people and having, a go-to. I do Facebook Lives every single week on Wednesday mornings at 9 a.m. I have different topics that I talk about, whether it's about investing or foreclosure or interviews with experts or talking about the housing market. These are the things that we need to be doing to educate the people in our community. And whether it's, young people buying their first home or older folks, folks transitioning into assisted living or whatever it is, I think being a resource is probably the most important thing that we can do right now, to let people know that we have the help and that we're able to help in any way that we can. And like I said, if I can't, I will find somebody who can.
And I've sat in on some of the Facebook Lives and I've learned so much. I've been able to pass on, what I've learned to other people that have questions. And I think it's really true. The more we build a community and the more we create the relationships, there's trust. And this is a time when it is overwhelming and we don't know who to trust. And it's so helpful when you can start to feel like you understand the person and their heart and why they're helping you and what's going on and can help you navigate it. So I think it's really important and it's really good work that you're doing to be able to give people that peace of mind.
Thank you. It's something that we really pride ourselves on. And it's really been important, like I said, for us to build these relationships and these networks and referrals, because we have to do this as a community together. Because, this year, especially this last year for everybody especially, has been really, really hard, whether, mental health, physical health, emotional health, financial, all of it's been really hard for many people.
Mm-hmm.
And so taking those things into consideration and having some type of plan that you can help folks out with in whatever way you can, that's what we need to be doing, because we need to get through this together. We have to build this community, have this referral network to be able to help out in whatever way that we can. And that's really something that Property Haus Partners has really set ourselves apart from, other folks that do some of the same things that we do, is because we do it with integrity, we do it with ethics, and we do it with compassion.
When we're talking about being proactive and having a heart for the people that we are caring for, part of that is having hard conversations, and we don't know where to start. And a lot of what, if we're summing up a little bit what we've talked about, it's planning ahead, being proactive, having conversations ahead of time. What advice would you give others in when to have that conversation, how to come alongside that care team when you're looking at those transitions, whether it's from home to assisted living, if they're thinking about making a change within their real estate? What would you say to those people involved?
A lot of the times, I think we're always very concerned about the well-being of our loved one. And of course, that's the most important thing that we have to be concerned about. But the other things that go into it can also be extremely important for their well-being. I can tell you a little story here. Is I had a neighbor of mine who was in his 90s and had a fall at his home. And after that point, the family decided that it wasn't safe for him to be in his home. And so they took him out, put him in an assisted living facility. And then unfortunately, the house sat empty for about 2 years. And one day we had seen this ice mountain that was forming outside on the outside of the house. And we went over there, checked on it, and it had happened that the boiler had broke and the water was continuously running for probably a good few days. And what ended up happening was that the entire basement was flooded. They had to gut all of it out. They got in a fight with their insurance company. The house was pretty much ruined. And to be honest, when they told him that had happened, it really saddened him, and he was super upset about it. And not to say that it ruined everything, but I think when people take such pride in their homes, when they've lived there for 20, 30, 40 years, to see it ruined, in such a short period of time, I think can really impact them spiritually, emotionally, mentally. All of that, really can kind of bear down on someone and just not put them in a good emotional state. And so thinking about when people are going into, if they're transitioning into assisted living, that I think it's really important for the care team to maybe ask some of those questions. I don't know if that is asked, but I think that's something I think would be really important, is to say, when we're looking at, again, a holistic piece for you, what's happening with this, what's happening here, and having us being a referral for that, of like, have you decided what's going to happen with the home? Because the sooner that's taken care of, not only is the family not have to worry about that after their loved one passes, which again, kind of transfers some of that burden right down the family line, is that we know that this is taken care of. We know that we've worked with somebody who's going to do the best of their ability, to purchase the home for us, so we don't have to worry about it. And I think having that being part of, the transition piece and having that discussion, I think will only help, make that family feel better about their loved one, and then all of the other pieces that kind of come after that.
I absolutely think that you touched on something that needs to happen, is having people ask that question, what is happening to all of the things that you loved and cared about while we're transitioning into something different, that we can really, really relax in a way and understand that everything that we've cared for previously and everything that we've built our whole life to maintain and really take a lot of pride in is being really well taken care of. So I think that's a great idea. So, with all that said, why wouldn't someone just go with a traditional realtor, right? That's the status quo. That's what people do. What's the difference between working with a company like Property House Partners rather than a traditional realtor?
That's a really good question. And our services aren't necessarily for everybody, right? I think, I am not a licensed realtor. I do have people on my team who are licensed, but I am not. And the reason I'm not is because I buy homes from people directly from them. And that also saves them from those commissions of using a traditional realtor, which, on the sell side, it's usually anywhere between 5 to 7% of what that sale price is. And for some people, they're looking to maximize whatever they can on that home to sell it. Now, granted, if there's work that needs to be done, obviously on my side, if there's deferred maintenance or a hoarding situation, or updates are needed because they haven't switched out their oven since the 70s, I mean,
Yeah.
still works, but now, like I said, the turn is for really having a turnkey property. That's what really people are looking for. And that's what we do. We update homes, we get them ready to sell for people to move into and feel good about. And I mean, I have a woman I'm working with right now in a house that we're fixing, and she had to move out because the basement had flooded some and there was mold in her basement, and she actually was getting sick from it and moved in with her children. And I bought the home from her and I've been redoing it. And she just sent me a text message the other day and said, "What kind of discounts do you give for me to move back into my old house?" Because she really liked how it was looking. And, that's kind of fun to hear those things, because we can bring these houses really back to life and back to the memories of what they had when they first moved in. And that's the wonderful piece of it, is that we get to help people closely and intimately if that makes sense for them. And so we also can close a lot quicker because we purchase with cash. And so, I've closed in as little as 5 days, and sometimes as long as 60 days. It all just depends on what they're looking for. But that's one of the benefits really of working with somebody like me, is that it's a quick close. I always buy as is, meaning that they don't have to make any fixes to it. I don't do any inspections. There's no contingencies. I've looked at enough houses to know exactly pretty much what it is going to cost if I have to fix things. And so it's a very easy transition. I pay all the closing costs. And so the number that I offer somebody is the number that they walk away with, minus like title transfer and those, small little details at closing. But that's what it is. It's a very open, honest conversation that we have. And I make it as easy as possible for them. If they have an attorney, I'll work with attorneys. I mean, I don't mind whatever I have to do to make the transition as seamless as possible for them. That's what we do at Property Haus. It's easy. And that's why people work with us.
When you are supporting them, is making it easy. That is the difference. It's not for everybody. And obviously, you're not located in every state and where people possibly are, but it's the idea that there is someone out there that can help them take that load off, help with the burden that they're carrying when they're really, the family really is, their first priority is their loved one and their health and their mental health and well-being. And so this is a side of the aging process that we tend to overlook. What steps would you give our listeners so that they feel equipped to manage some of those real estate concerns?
I think once a family has decided that it's time for their loved one to move out of their home, I think it's important to consider what their options are, whether it's ready to be sold traditionally on, the market, on the MLS. Is there work that needs to be done to the home? Can we just sell it the way that it is? Do we need to clean things out? All of those things need to come into consideration when they're really trying to figure out what to do with the home. That's a really good time to contact us, because what we end up doing is we come over there and we can say, what are you looking to do? Are you looking to sell traditionally? Are you looking to sell just for cash and as is offer? And that's the other part, is a lot of the times when we go to folks' homes, we give them 3 or 4 different options. It's not just about, here's my cash offer and you can walk away. Sometimes that doesn't make sense for people. And so really asking those pertinent questions really helps me create a plan that's going to work for them. I typically end up spending about an hour or so with folks on every appointment that I'm at, because I have to ask those questions in order to determine what the best approach is going to be. And I know a lot of the times people know a traditional realtor and they want to go that route, and that's completely acceptable, of course. If that makes sense, then I will send them that way, or I'll ask them to work with us, because a lot of the times too, we give a discount when we list houses for people, because it's not something that we traditionally do, but we do it. The other side is really saying, okay, here are the things in the house that you can probably sell at an estate sale. Here's some things that we probably have to move out before you sell it. Or, hey, there's a lot of work that needs to be done in this house. Do you feel capable and competent to be able to finish it yourself? If you do, here's a really good referral for that. If you don't, it's something that we can take on for you. And so I think the point of calling us is to give them those options for them to then weigh them and then decide what makes the most sense. Because if you look at it, if people are ready to sell in a month or two, that's great. And you can put it on the market and have it be done with. But the thing is if there's other things that get in the way from you selling the property, then you have to really think about what your options are outside of the traditional sale. And that's exactly where Property Haus Partners can help you to come up with a plan that makes sense. And, not only for the family, but also for the person, who lived there, to have them feel good about what happens with their home.
Yes, and with a plan, we feel really empowered, and you make it so personal. We will absolutely link to where everyone can find out how to contact you, learn more about Property Haus Partners, whether they have any real estate questions, whether they want to just have a conversation and be heard. We will let them know how to find you. Jen, thank you so much for joining us. All of your wisdom and your insight. I know it's a world that certainly overwhelms me. I can't imagine how many people have to face those really difficult decisions, but it's so helpful to know that you guys are available to help them walk through that journey with their loved one and feel really empowered and cared for and personal.
Thank you. It was a real pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed our episode, please subscribe and give us 5 stars. In all honesty, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much for listening to our episode.